evolution, a deliberate yet subliminal process for all but humankind. We cannot wait.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
He's on the move. That's cool.
The year is 1973. Man's first home in space, Skylab, is in orbit. Throughout the 3 Skylab missions, flight crews conducted experiments in medicine, Earth observation, engineering, solar physics, and astrophysics. The technology developed during Skylab provided the basis for the design and development of future long-duration space stations. In addition to providing a laboratory for important studies, Skylab marked a significant transition in the spaceflight program. In each Skylab mission, astronauts became workers rather than observers. Skylab also provided a testing ground for techniques and equipment that would be needed for man to work effectively in space. One of the tools tested, the Astronaut Maneuvering Unit, would prove its usefulness on future flights of the Space Shuttle. February 1984. The 11th mission of the Space Shuttle program, Mission 41B, is in orbit. The Astronaut Maneuvering Unit tested on Skylab is now known as the Manned Maneuvering Unit, or MMU. Its first test in open space is about to begin. Here, astronaut McCandless was over 100 meters out from the spacecraft. He'd proven the manned maneuvering unit could be flown in space, and he simulated something very important. He traveled the same distance another astronaut would have to travel 2 months later to get from the shuttle to an ailing NASA satellite. On the next shuttle flight, a satellite called Solar Max would be picked up by the shuttle, repaired on orbit in the payload bay, and then returned to space. Solar Max was launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida on January the 14th, 1980, in the year of the solar maximum. The 1 year out of every 11 that the Sun is most active, but within 9 months, Solar Max had developed serious problems. Fortunately, Solar Max was a forerunner amongst satellites designed to be repaired while still in orbit. In fact, one of the main reasons for the 41B mission was to test the tools and techniques that would be used to repair Solar Max on the next flight. The mission saw the first use of a chest-mounted training pin attachment device, or TPAD, designed to couple the astronaut to the Solar Max to stabilize it before its retrieval and repair. In addition to the activities with the MMU, another important piece of equipment that had to be evaluated for the first time was the manipulator foot restraint. Analogous to a cherry picker in its design, it mounted on the end of the shuttle's remote manipulator arm and held astronauts firmly in place with boot restraints while positioning them anywhere in the shuttle's cargo bay. Importantly, it limited propellant expenditure in the MMU's jetpacks, allowing for much longer periods of actual repair work. Unfortunately, Flight 41B was also the mission on which the West Star and Palapa communication satellites failed to reach their expected orbits. The deployment of both satellites from Shuttle's payload bay went off without a hitch, but the rocket motor nozzles failed, causing the thrust to be dispersed. Without propulsion, the satellites could not reach transfer orbits. April 1984, Shuttle Flight 41C on orbit, having rendezvoused with the Solar Max satellite. Maneuvering unit pilot George Nelson made his way over to the satellite. Commander Robert Crippen, pilot Dick Scobie, and mission specialist Terry Hart monitored his progress, and the progress of James Van Hoften, waiting in the payload bay. Nelson was having trouble docking with the satellite. The T-pad was not locking onto the trunnion pin, and his attempts were causing the satellite to wobble. His maneuvering unit propellant level was also getting low. He would have to return to the shuttle. Solar Max would have to be grappled instead with the shuttle's robot arm. Nelson headed back in while the crew on board prepared to capture Solar Max. The shuttle was out of range of voice and picture coverage while Robert Crippen maneuvered the ship and Terry Hart tried grappling the satellite with the robot arm. On the ground, mission controllers anxiously awaited word from the crew. Minutes went by before they got the news. The grapple didn't work. Low on electricity, with its poorly positioned solar panels, an alternate plan had to be found. Goddard Space Flight Center immediately investigated a new way to restabilize Solar Max. A new attitude control program was transmitted up to the satellite's onboard computer. To give as much power as possible to this new stabilizing attempt, Goddard turned off all the heaters, the instruments, and everything else not essential to the stabilizing effort. Solar Max was entering the crucial eclipse on the dark side of the Earth, and when it emerged, its power was almost gone, but it had stabilized considerably. The method worked. The next time controllers checked, the satellite had stabilized even further and moved into a position that exposed the solar panels to the sun for a brief 10 minutes. When the crew awoke from their sleep period, Goddard had presented them with a Solar Max that was ready for capture. Crippen could now move the shuttle toward the satellite for another grapple attempt with the robot arm. With Solar Max secure in shuttle's payload bay, the repair could now begin. The first order of business was to repair the attitude control system. Next, work was done to repair the circuit box on one of the satellite's experimental electrical systems. Overnight, Goddard went through their satellite checklist to make sure all systems were operational. The following day, Solar Max was redeployed with its attitude control system and all 7 of its experiments working properly. The first retrieval and repair of a satellite in space had been a success. The fact that Mission 41C had been successful strongly influenced the decision to make Mission 51A a mission that would rescue the Palapa and West Star satellites from their failed orbits. A crew was named and began training as a team with equipment designed and built specifically for the rescue of Palapa and West Star. Perhaps one of the most important elements of the retrieval operation was the motorized capture device, or Stinger as it was called. It was the tool the astronaut would use, together with his maneuvering unit, to capture the satellite, stabilize it, and bring it back to the shuttle. Hughes Aircraft Company had to begin the complex task of manoeuvring the satellites into the right position so that retrieval could be possible at all. This required the two satellites to be positioned in a precise orbit and at a precise time to rendezvous with the shuttle. On November the 8th, 1984, the shuttle and its crew of 5 set out to rescue Palapa and West Star. Palapa was there. Hughes Aircraft Company had lived up to its end of the bargain. Manoeuvring Unit Pilot Joe Allen flew over to dock with Palapa, while Commander Rick Halp, pilot Dave Walker, and Mission Specialist Anna Fisher monitored his progress, and the progress of Dale Gardner waiting in the payload bay. Allen inserted the Stinger device into the satellite, docked, then using his maneuvering unit, stabilized the satellite. Fisher moved in with the robot arm and brought Allen and the satellite back into the payload bay. There, Gardner attempted to attach the A-frame device to the satellite. The A-frame had a grapple fixture installed on it to be used by the robot arm to hold the satellite, while Gardner and Allen attached the support structure to it. This support structure was used to secure Palapa in the payload bay for its return to Earth. The shuttle went out of range of voice and picture coverage as Gardner attempted to attach the A-frame. But there was a problem. The A-frame would not fit to the satellite due to a small but unaccounted for structure on the body of the satellite itself.
That it is hitting the cross brace of the common bracket clamp, and it's not a piece of structure I can remove.
Okay, understand that, and what are you proposing to do?
If the entire mission was not to be a failure, then once again, an alternate method had to be found.
I will go up to the PFR in the forward pallet and try the technique perfected by yourself.
Okay, we copy Plan B and proceed.
Okay.
Plan B was a contingency procedure that astronauts Jerry Ross and Pinky Nelson came up with 1 week prior to launch. Unlike Solar Max, West Star and Palapa were not designed to be retrieved. The customers didn't intend ever to see these satellites again, so there was no need to pay for extensive documentation. As a result, mission planners had to anticipate that the drawings would not illustrate all the details. Plan B required Allen to detach himself from the satellite, fly into the payload bay and stow his jetpack. Thereafter, he would use the foot restraint device attached to the robotic arm so he could position himself to literally catch the satellite. While this was being done, Gardner performed adjustments to the other side of the satellite. Then, both men physically berthed the satellite by hand. Naturally, it was a tense time back on Earth while the hazardous procedure took place. Eventually, the satellite was secured in the payload bay, but not easily. Plan B needed to be improved. There was a one-day intermission between the retrieval of Palapa and West Star, so Jerry Ross and Pinky Nelson went back into the water tank at the Johnson Space Center to see if Plan B could indeed be improved upon. Improvements were discovered that allowed astronauts to work vertically at the end of the robotic arm, so as not to be hindered by the satellite already safely stowed aboard. And in so doing, West Star was also rescued. Mission 51A was a success, a dramatic example of the usefulness of man's presence in space. 51A also proved once again that plans and procedures could be altered on the spot if necessary to get the job done. NASA would put this experience into good use again in 1985 as 2 additional missions became involved in satellite rescue and repair. April 85, Space Shuttle Discovery is in orbit. The mission started normally enough with Telesat-1, the Canadian communications satellite, being spring ejected from the cargo bay. During the crew's second day in space, SIMCOM-4 was deployed. Everything seemed to be going as planned. The crew watched expectantly for the omnidirectional antenna on top of the satellite to raise to its upright position. However, this simply did not eventuate. Control requested visual aid by way of photographs to enable them to better assess the problem. About 45 minutes after deployment from the cargo bay, the firing of SIMCOM-4's motors, which would put it into its geosynchronous orbit, did not occur. It was discovered that a switch lever at the side of the satellite had not been tripped as the satellite left the cargo bay. Mission controllers had to devise apparatus that could be attached to the robotic arm to trigger the switch. Improvised tools were made out of metal tubing, plastic book covers, window shades, wire and tape. The entire procedure for making and using these devices went through a trial run on the ground, or rather in the water. A mock-up of the SIMCOM satellite was used to see if the method they devised would work. The mission was extended for 2 days so the shuttle could rendezvous with the unoperational satellite. During that time, ground control sent very detailed instructions on the building of the tools needed for the new part of the mission. Mission specialists Jeff Hoffman and David Briggs prepared for the EVA while mission specialist Ray Seddon maneuvered the robotic arm into position so that the improvised tools could be easily attached by Hoffman and Briggs. The people at control monitored and cautioned the astronauts as they went about the tricky maneuver. The next day, Commander Carol Bubko and pilot Don Williams maneuvered the shuttle into position for the rendezvous with SIMCOM. But the question still remained: could the last-minute devices actually trigger the switch on the outer shell of the satellite? As it happened this time, the answer was no. The primitive tools that they devised came close but failed, and NASA decided that further attempts to trip the switch would not be made. On the ground, Hughes Aircraft Company engineers performed an extensive failure analysis in the weeks that followed Mission 51B. This analysis led to the deployment of 2 separate electronics units designed to activate the dormant satellite. Thereafter, NASA and Hughes agreed to develop a shuttle mission that would attempt to salvage SIMCOM. This joint effort was based largely on experience gained by NASA during the repair of the SolarMax satellite and the retrieval of Palapa and West Star. On August the 27th, 1985, Space Shuttle Mission 51I was launched. Amongst the objectives was to capture and repair the ailing SIMCOM satellite. On Flight Day 2, maneuvers to rendezvous with the satellite began. Once rendezvous operations were completed, the salvage and repair operations could begin. Mission specialists James Van Hoften and Bill Fisher prepared for the repair in the cargo bay, while mission specialist Bill Lounge operated the robot arm. and Commander Joe Engel and pilot Richard Cubby monitored their progress. It was Van Hoften's task to go out to the end of the robotic arm and manually secure the satellite. Fisher had the responsibility of repairing some damaged wiring and installing several new electronics boxes that would allow the eventual deployment of the omnidirectional antenna. The repairs took the astronauts out of the shuttle for a period of 7 hours and 8 minutes, beating the previous record of extravehicular activity by a minute. Part of the repairs included the installation of a timer in the electronics circuitry that would allow Hughes ground control to communicate with the satellite. The finishing touches actually meant giving SIMCOM its initial spin momentum.
Okay, we copy. That's great work, everybody.
I still see the timer blinking. Good work. Yeah, I did too.
The mission had been a success. Experiences gained on Skylab and these space shuttle missions are the foundation on which space station operations of the future will be built. With the combination of a manned base and automated systems, the servicing of satellites will become routine, as will the deployment and operation of scientific instrument platforms. Capabilities not yet dreamed of. A future within our reach, and all as we continue to build towards new heights.